do it. There we go. Hi guys. So I actually have a question for you guys. How many of you have not actually driven in the snow yet? Really? Okay. That's actually surprising. All right. How many of you have actually experienced like a true Rochester or Buffalo snow and had to drive in it? Okay. So hopefully I can help you from now on after this. I'm gonna talk to you about how to actually correctly drive in the snow because I am from Buffalo. There's a shit ton of snow that drops from there. He went there. So I actually have a story for you guys. This actually happened to me like during break, where I had to drive through literally 4 feet of snow on the road. There was 4 feet piled up with like another 1.5 foot next to it, and I had to drive on top of it for like 2 hours because it took forever. It was scary, and I don't want to do that again. So hopefully I can help you not die in that kind of situation. So disclaimer, first off, I am not a professional driver in any way. If I tell you to do something and you kill yourself, it's not my fault. Any laws that I point out, please don't tell me I'm wrong, because I'm saying New York laws, not your state's laws, because New York is bad. Oh, nothing.
It's fine.
All right, so let's go on. So it's snowing. Help, what do? So I actually want to just go through just quick driving tips just to help you get through everything. Handling sliding, because that's a common thing that happens when you're in the snow. I want to show you some elite winter driving items that you can keep in your car that will help you not die. And then getting unstuck, because that's another problem that most people get into. So, winter driving tips. First things first, always keep your lights on. If it's snowing, regardless if it's daylight, nighttime, whatever, please keep your lights on. It's easier to see you. Even if you have daylight driving lights, keep your normal nighttime lights on. It helps immensely to see you. If it gets bad, like really bad, and you're going like 45 on, or even 20 on a 30 or something, put your hazards on. That always helps too, because something blinking is so much easier to see than something that's just static. Make sure your tires are always properly inflated. So actually on your door of your car, if you open up the driver's side door and you look down at that little white patch, yes, there's actually relevant information on that thing. It tells you how much your tires need to be inflated to be properly inflated. So next time you go get gas over at Fast Track, they have free air. Free air? Yeah, exactly. So get your free air, pump up your tires, because apparently it's supposed to be winter now. Accelerate and decelerate slowly. This is like the best thing to do ever in the snow. So I know a bunch of you that would just go up, look, and just put your foot down, take the turn, and go. No fucks given. Don't do that. That will make you slide very, very, very quickly. Or you'll just stay there because you'll be spinning. So take it slow. Also decelerate slowly. Whenever you're driving with snow and you're going to slide, most likely, keep an extra 1 to 2 car lengths between you and the next car. That's the next distance. So when you stop, you don't accidentally hit the person behind you. Also, I know people who also come up to stop signs like they magically appeared there out of nowhere. So they're going 30 or something. Next thing you know, they're 10 feet from the sign, and they don't do that. Next, keep your distance. Kind of talked about that with decelerate. Finally found this button. Drive slow. Just always try to stay lower than either on or lower than the recommended speed limit. Cops aren't going to pull you over for going too slow, especially if it's really bad out. And then, when you're driving and there's a lot of snow on the road, try not to stop if you can't. I understand if you get to a stop sign and you have to stop because legally you were supposed to stop at a stop sign. But if you're on the road and someone is too scared and decides to pull off the road, and you get too scared and you want to pull off on the road, just don't. Just keep going. It gets easier. If you stop, there's a higher chance of you getting stuck. We don't want that. Next, help! I'm sliding. What did? So This is when you're driving along and either you lose traction in the back or front of your car, most likely in the back of your car. First things first is just relax. You're not going to die, I hope. If your foot is on the gas, take your foot off the gas. Accelerating while you're sliding is never a good thing. And also, if you're braking, don't add any more pressure. Just try to keep the same pressure. Don't try to wear out your brakes or your tires at more than they need to be. And then the most important thing I learned from cars, surprisingly, you turn into the way you're sliding. Like if you're making a right turn and your back end makes a left, turn to the left. It will straighten you out. Then the final thing is just good luck. Hopefully you don't keep sliding. Hopefully eventually you'll slow down enough where you can get control, or you get into a ditch or something, and then you have to call AAA. But now some survival tips. First things first, put something heavy in your trunk. That can be anything from cat litter, which is what I use, a bag of rock salt, skip that one, or just keep your washer fluid in your trunk. Keeping something heavy in the back of your car will weigh it down. Even if you have a front-wheel drive car, which I'm pretty sure most of us have, if it's weighed down in the back, you get more traction, like a lot more traction, and it helps immensely. So if you don't, you're just going to be sliding even more. Me, this is the shovel I keep in my car. It's cool because it breaks down. So it makes it really small. But yeah, engineering at its finest. This thing is cheap. This thing was like $10. You can find them literally anywhere. So please get one. It helps a lot if you get stuck. And your phone. So we're all engineers here, or we're all software engineers, I hope, or some sort of engineering where we're smart enough to realize that we need to have a cell phone. So most of you, I'm pretty sure you all have cell phones, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a dumb phone, Wade. But your phone is your best tool. Like if you get stuck and you can't get unstuck, or you're hurt or something, just call somebody. Call 911. Call your mom crying. I don't care. Just call somebody. And also keep a charger in your car. Like you're driving a giant battery. Like it's essentially just a big battery with gas in it. So charge your phone while you're driving, so you always have your phone. Now you're stuck because you didn't listen to me, and you slid into a ditch or something, or you're that guy who decides to drive in the next to the colony, like the way out of colony. Those people who drive through the grass. You're that guy. Exactly. So now you're stuck. All right. So now see how stuck you are. If you're flipped over, or your back or front wheels are above the ground or off the ground, you're done for. Skip to the bottom. But if you're like all leveled out, you can at least back out, move forward, backwards. Then you can try this. First things first. Take the shovel, or anything that resembles a shovel, and make a path for your car. So first things first, always clear your exhaust of anything, because that will kill you if you don't. Then clear around your tires. Second, use the cat litter or the rock salt that I said you should keep in the back of your car to help create traction. If you actually put it underneath your tires, both the front and the back, and then the way that you want to go, it will help you keep traction so you can get out. Then next, get in your car, turn it on, get it all warm and snug or whatever, and start rocking your car. What I mean by rocking is going back and forth. So if you need to back out of something that you're stuck in, pull it a little forward, put it in reverse, and don't gun it, but put more force into going backwards until you can't go any farther. Then go forward, then back until you start moving. It helps. If all else fails, hopefully you have your phone. Call 911. Call AAA if you have it. Call your mom crying. In conclusion, Just drive slow. Don't be an idiot. Just please don't be dumb. Drive slow. Take your time. Practice. What I mean by this is, I'm that guy that's going to tell you to go out to one of the parking lots over break or something. If there's fresh snow, I want you to actually go out there and drift and have fun. But not too much fun or you would die. Or don't be that guy that gets stuck in the pond next to Perkins. Don't be that guy. Also, just don't drive if you don't need to. Like, if it's bad out and you need to get somewhere, most people will understand that it's bad out and you just don't need to go. If you really do, like your grandma's sick or something and you have to make the drive, just take it slow. All this. So, any questions? No? No? Okay. Give it up for Holly. She's going to talk about why Scrum sucks.
Okay, so I didn't know that these weren't supposed to be SE related, but mine's SE related.
It can't be.
I'm going to talk about why Scrum sucks. So we're always told, hey, Scrum can basically solve anything. Hey, you have low productivity. Let's use Scrum. Hey, your project is over budget. Let's use Scrum. Hey, your customer is unhappy. Let's use Scrum. Hey, Phil has athletes buddy. Yeah, sure, Scrum. And then they look at all the companies, like Facebook uses Scrum, Amazon uses Scrum, Microsoft, Google. They use Scrum. And if your company uses Scrum, you will be like these companies, and everything will be awesome. So this is the way to Scrum success. Step 1, you get a certified Scrum Master. You become a Scrum Master by taking a 2-day course and getting a 69 on an exam. Step 2, bring everyone together for a seminar. Step 3, Step 4, I can't count. I mean, this is when I was tired. Profit. So you do all this, and then what happens? You fail. But why did you fail? Scrum is simple. Like, how did you mess it up? Scrum is flexible. How did you mess it up? Unfortunately, the problem isn't with Scrum, because Scrum is so simple that basically the implementation is hard. So let's start with planning poker. I'm sure everyone has heard about planning poker. So everyone's vote is equal, right? In Scrum, everyone's equal. That's not really true. I mean, you can try all you want to say everyone is equal, but some people's opinions will still matter more to people than others. So you will never get the everyone's fine, everything's good in planning poker. And also, if planning poker is actually doing what you want, it will take a really long time, which you don't want in Scrum. See, Scrum fail too. Scrum can actually turn anti-agile in this way. So, we've got this from the principles of Agile. Working software is the primary measure of progress. In Scrum, they don't care about working code anymore. It's all about velocity and story points, which compared to working code can kind of not really mesh well. Let's see, design. Scrum really hates that if you talk about design in Sprint 0. They kind of just want you to make up design as you go, which isn't always the best idea and can cause things to not work later on. But if you try to bring up Sprint during Sprint 0, they'll say, what are you doing? You're not saying we should create a phase for design, right? You're not saying we should be like waterfall, are you? Is that what you're saying? We're doing waterfall? And then the waterfall devil shows up and you're all going to hell. Let's see, there's tons of other ones, but I was too tired to make some up. But if you go online, you can find them. The one is the extended stand-up. You know, they're supposed to be 15 minutes at most, but the one I've always been in less than an hour, and half of the people start sitting down. Or people have post stand-ups, where after you have your hour stand-up, you have another meeting that technically isn't the stand-up, so whatever. There's some items no one wants to do because it doesn't look good in velocity or whatever. And also, Scrum wants to say it's not really a process, but I found this one site. So far, they have 80 plus rules of Scrum. And I don't know, but that sounds pretty process heavy to me. And there's tons of other ones. But anyways, the one thing I don't get about Scrum is they can't name things. Agile is supposed to be sustainable, but they call their iterations sprints. Sprints are not sustainable. I can't sprint for 2 seconds without dying. And if you try sprinting right after you sprint, it's not going to go well. So, yeah, Scrum messed that up. So that's it.
So my name's Wade. I'm here to talk to you about something very special to my heart. How many of you have heard of video games?
What?
Almost all of you.
What?
All right. Now, how many of you have heard of this particular video game called League of Legends? Significantly fewer.
That's a Dota, right?
That's all right. That's all right. Significantly fewer. Now, how many of you have played League of Legends? More than have heard of it. That's confusing. So I'm going to tell you how to get to plat in League of Legends. Is there a question in the back?
Are you plat?
I am not plat. We're not going to talk about that. So, the first thing you need to realize is that getting to plat can be hard. It's okay if you don't get it at first. You'll get there someday.
Tell yourself that way.
As a general rule, so as a general rule, always pick support fiddlesticks. If you're going to play League of Legends and you're not immediately getting into chat because you're obviously playing blind pick, it's the best mode, you're going to call support and then you're going to tell everybody not to ban fiddlesticks. Because support fiddlesticks is best fiddlesticks. If someone steals your support role, there's only one solution. Then you always pick Janna to go in the jungle. She does the whooshy thing, and that'll stop other people from taking your jungle camps. This is the only strategy to play jungle. With these two roles, you'll never lose. This is how you get to plat, everybody. So what happens if you don't get support or jungle? Well, then you feed. You need to let the community know that you're going to play either support with fiddlesticks or Janna in the jungle, or you're just not going to play at all. Your team deserves this. But wait, there's more. What did you think it was going to be that simple? So you'll notice that as you collect gold throughout the game, you'll be able to spend it on items to make you a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, whatever have you. The best item in the game is the Banner of Command. If you're not using the Banner of Command, you're wrong. Always buy Banner of Command. But wait a minute. Did you notice that too? Yeah. The Banner of Command has the same color scheme as the Soviet flag. This is clearly no coincidence, as you'll see. Wait, there's a star here. Could it be? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Banner of Command. Coincidence? And while we're on the topic of stars, you'll notice another champion by this name of Alistar. Alistar. There's another star that comes to mind then, and his name is Harlan Hogan. Now just hold on, just bear with me. We're almost done. You're almost to plat. But Hogan's a very interesting name, isn't it? Almost draws the most incriminating piece of evidence yet. We're almost to plat, but we need to consider Hulk Hogan as a piece of our American hero, or
Yes.
This is the proof we need. You decide. Questions?
Crony 2012.
How do you play Dominion?
Well,
Oh,
you don't anymore. You feed. Any other questions?
Is dynamic queue up? I hear yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
sure.
Does shit talking the other team, does that help at all?
So, we didn't have time for that in this, but if I was giving a full-length talk, we would have had at least 15 minutes about shitposting. Shitposting is one of the best strategies to win because otherwise your teammates don't know how badly you want to win. If they don't know, they'll just think they're trolling, and then they'll just feed the whole game. Yes?
What about shit talking your allies, like your teammates?
Well, yeah, shit-talking your allies. That's exactly what Did you think I meant the other players? No, shit-talking on your allies is the only winning strategy. All right.
John, I think. Is next. I believe. Yeah.
So now that you're all warmed up, let's get going, I suppose. Hey everyone, I'm John. And this should be fun, I hope. I really hope. So this is sort of like a bit of a rant, and hopefully at the end you'll go, huh, and we'll all walk away and forget it ever happened. So what's a bit? This is funny. No, so a bit might look like 0 or 1, or true or false, or red or blue. And really, a bit just means anything where there's 2 possible values and it's one of the 2. There's like a set definition if you're interested. And you can only be a bit relative to a domain. So like the number 1 is only a bit when it's relative to 0 and 1, not when it's relative to like 0, 1, and 3, because then it's not a binary digit anymore. It'd be 1 of 3. So let's consider this domain, and bits green and gray. And this other domain where we have bits true and false, which I got resized. Okay. Well, anyway, so we want to draw some equivalences and map between them. So we can encode one domain into another, where we can say, okay, well, green in that domain corresponds to true, and gray corresponds to false. Encoding, it's not that bad. And so we have essentially we have domains that go into encoders and pop out something in another domain, which is pretty reasonable. And if you're up on your discrete math, encoders map from one domain onto another, which means they can collapse values, but every value in one domain must come through. But that's not really exciting when we just have a single bit, so we're talking about sequences now, where we can start to do some cool things. And so obviously for a sequence of n bits, you have 2 to the n possible values represented by the sequence, which is pretty, like, not that profound. So the question then is, what does green, gray, green mean? Any takers? Not necessarily, because meaning is actually all in encoding. Meaning, when you ask what something means, you're asking what does this thing in one domain mean in another, and you have to run it through an encoder to get some kind of answer out. So if we're trying to figure out what it means, we have to pick an encoder and then give it a meaning that way. So here's an encoder. Where basically we define a function that says if we're talking about green, well, let's give it a 1, and if it's gray, we'll give it a 0, and then we'll run it over our input. So we got it. Yay. 1, 0, 1. We say they're now the same, which is, again, not that profound. So, but we now know that this means 1, 0, 1 to our encoder, which is kind of fun. And just while we're talking about it, efficiency-wise, we've expressed 3 bits in 3 bits. When we moved across, we didn't really do a whole lot. But let's say we imagine another encoder that all it does is counts. So we monotonically increase. So there's one green there, a gray, and a green. So that's 2. So we're going to go 1, 0, 1, and then we're going to remove the zeros and get 1, 1. So we can do this, and we've now lost a bit, but we're more efficient, except we're also lossy. So when we're moving from green, gray, green to 1, 0, 1, there exists an encoder that can go backwards. We could say, oh yeah, I could go backwards and I could get what I had originally. But when you get to here, there's no way of knowing what you had originally. I could have had 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, all sorts of things. You just never know. So we can compose encoders like we did here. So we should run 2 encoders, treat it as 1, and just like you do with functions. Cool, okay. nothing too profound yet. But the talk is about compilers and interpreters, and so far we've only been encoding. But doesn't this look a whole lot like a compiler? Not quite. So let's talk about interpreters instead. We'll come back. So interpreters execute instructions. They do things. But doing things isn't as simple to talk about mathematically because it involves change over time. Time has to be involved here somehow. So we normally think of time on a timeline that goes from left to right, starting point A. We can talk about some arbitrary point B in the future, and it keeps going. Or we can talk about it in terms of individual moments. And we can talk about it as moments that we move from one moment to the next via a transition function known as physics. That says the universe exists in this state, physics works a certain way, so the next moment it'll be in a different state. And this looks a lot like our encoders that we saw before. And this is really fun. We can go from moment 1 to moment 2 to moment 3 by constantly just running an encoder over it, which is just really a function. Unfortunately, we don't really know that time is like 3 steps, for example, and be like, yeah, like here you go. So we need to get a little more complex. So in order to understand time, you must first understand time. For those of you who are up on your XKCD, we're now going to talk about recursive encoders, and it's going to have to get a little weird. In theory, a recursive encoder like this one, or I'm going to call it an interpreter because we'll see why. So we have the universal interpreter, which takes in a moment and returns back that moment, run through physics, and then interpret it again. Which means that from a given moment, run through the interpreter, we hit moment infinity, which is really not useful at all because we can never actually get there. It's just going to kind of go for forever. But time has moments, and we experience time. So how can we talk about this? Well, we can start to unwrap it. And we can look at it and say, oh, well, if we start to unwrap this recursive expression, we get, oh, moment 1 goes to moment 2, which then goes to moment infinity. And we can unwrap it further. And for those of you who like your math, we can do it with math and say there exists a moment 1, and moment 2 is equal to p moment 1, and so forth, and we can constantly unfold this. So what we're actually doing is we can model the universe as a recursive interpreter that all it does, a recursive encoder, that every moment is a step along the process of evaluating itself, which is really cool. Which is important because now we have a framework in which we can talk about doing anything. So computing now is like, okay, well, the universe, I guess, kind of chugs along, but how does computing work? So imagine these are the bits of the universe, and they describe the way things are at any given moment. And these bits describe the physical machine that will be doing the computing, and these bits represent the registers or electron states. So they're somewhere in this giant soup of bits. And when we run the physics function over it, what we want to get back, if we want to do good computing, is the physical machine, the bits will stay the same. And we'll be able to run the sub-interpreter, essentially, of computing over the registers, and then that will evaluate. And so this is like x86, for example. And so that's how computing works. So essentially, interpreters are specializations of the universal interpreter because you can't interpret anything if the universe isn't moving forward. Makes sense. And as a result, now we can finally come back. Now that we have interpreters down, we can talk about compilers very briefly, which is that compilers have side effects. They write to the disk. A compiler is not an encoder because you get something at the end of it. Encoders are just logical constructs that we talked about earlier. So therefore, if it's going to do anything, have side effects, it must be a specialization of the universal interpreter. And so compilers are actually just a form of interpreter, that what they do is they read in code, and then they execute it by writing other kinds of code to the hard drive. So really, when you think about it, everything's an interpreter. It's kind of fun. Do you guys have any questions? Sweet. Thanks.
We have next is the right one.
Compiler.
Yes.
Dig too deep into it. Because I wasn't sure.
Oh, nice.
Before I start, I just want to say how happy I am to be here right now. Honestly, I've been looking forward to this all week, and it's probably the highlight of my week. So thank you to all you wonderful people for showing up and listening to me ramble about something for a little while. So anyways, I'm going to be talking about the history of Rush. And no, I don't want you to join my fraternity. I'm talking about the 70s progressive rock band Rush. Really quick, quick shout out to Mark Bachman, or Bach or something. I don't know who you are, but he gave me a shout out on Facebook in endorsement of my talk. So thank you, Mark. Anyways, so I'm going to be talking about the formation of the band, the evolution, and where they are today. And Rush is a fascinating case study because they've been around for over 40 years, and they've been making music for over 40 years. So you can pick out these distinct periods in their history that are stylistically different from one another. So like the first period here, we have the classic prog rock Rush, which consists of really long form songs that tell like stories and that have interesting musical elements and Geddy Lee's classic screeching vocals. Then with the rise of the synthesizer in the 80s, we see the lead guitar kind of takes a step back and the synthesizer plays the role of the lead guitar. And then in the 90s, we see the return to heavy rock, and then into the contemporary period, which was mid-2000, we see a melding of kind of the heavy period and the classic period. So I'm going to deep dive into the classic period because I don't have a lot of time. But anyways, our story starts in 1974 in a suburb of Toronto called Willowdale with these three awesome dudes, Alex Lifeson, the lead guitarist, John Rutsey, the drummer, and Geddy Lee, the vocalist and the bass player. And Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee had been friends in high school, and they both come from families who immigrated to Canada after surviving the Holocaust after World War II. And so these three guys get together and they release an album called Rush. And they release it in Canada, and it receives some moderate success. But right before they're about to go on tour, John Rutsey drops out of the band. So they need to scramble to find a drummer. And so they hold auditions. The first guy doesn't really show up. He doesn't show up at all. And the second guy is a friend of both of theirs, and he's horrible. And the third guy is this really tall, kind of lanky, skinny guy with long brown greasy hair and with a strange vocabulary. He shows up with his small gray drum set and he starts jamming with them, and they're like, oh my god, this is the guy we need. And it turns out to be none other than Mr. Neil Peart, who would go on to become the drummer and the lyricist for the band Rush. Awesome dude. Anyways, so they received some moderate success in Canada. However, they have no distribution in the United States. So luckily for them, Donna Halper, this awesome woman right here, she was a DJ on the radio station WMMS Cleveland, and she plays Working Man on her radio show. And she says the phone boards just start lighting up, and she gets these calls like, is this the new Zeppelin album? And she's like, nope, Canadian rock band Rush. And so she knows that they're onto something special, and she calls up her friends at the record labels and says, we need to sign these guys. So they get a record label in a records deal in the United States, and they find huge success in their first album. So, the alignment's off. But in 1974, huge success tour. So in 1975, they released another album called Fly By Night, and this is the first album that Neil Peart writes most of the lyrics for. And those lyrics are inspired by the writings of Ayn Rand, and you get some awesome tunes like Anthem, Beneath, Between, Behind, and of course, Fly By Night. And so another huge commercial success for them. They're doing really great for themselves. But in 1975, later that year, they released an album called Caress of Steel. This is the beginning of the real Rush. But it has a lot more longer form songs on there. There's 2 tracks that are over 10 minutes long, but fans don't respond to it very well, and neither do critics. And so when they go on tour, a lot less people are showing up, a lot less people are buying their records, and the record company's pissed. So after the tour, they put a lot of pressure onto the band to produce the next record that could be played on the radio. So Rush thinks about this for a while, and they're like, this could be the end of Rush. This could be the last album we ever make. And so they're like, if we're going down our own way. So they release in 1976 the space rock epic that is 2112. And this album, the first track is a 20-minute long song that takes place that's set into a dystopian future where these beings called the priests rule with an iron fist on the world and mandate every aspect of the civilians' lives. And in the story, the protagonist finds a guitar in a cave, and he learns how to play it, and he discovers music. And he brings this guitar to the priests and says, look what I found. I found this awesome thing. This should be shared with the world. And the priests go, that's not what we're about. And they take the guitar and destroy it and shatter our protagonist's dreams. And through music, he found that there's so much more to life. And now that it's gone, there's nothing more to live for. And the rest of the song is about that internal struggle, and it's really great tune. The guitar solos mimic his emotional states at different parts of the song. Awesome tune. Eventually he kills himself at the end, but that's besides the point. But it's fantastic. What's really interesting about this song is how it parallels the music industry at the time. You had these big record companies mandating the content that the band should be producing, where it should be the opposite direction, the other way around. But luckily for Rush, 2112 was a huge success, and that really bought their freedom from the record labels. But anyways, we're going to cruise through the rest of their progressive period. So you have albums like Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres and songs like Cygnus. Cygnus is a 2-part song. It spans 2 albums. So Farewell to Kings ends with Cygnus, and Hemispheres begins with part 2 as Cygnus. So crazy stuff like that. They're definitely experimenting with music. And then we move into a transition phase where we're definitely heading towards synthesizers, especially when we hit 1981 with songs like Tom Sawyer, like doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and all that good stuff. But anyways, definitely recommend checking out those albums. So now, when we hit the 80s, like 1984, 1982, we are in the synthesizer phase. Geddy Lee, the bassist and vocalist, falls in love with the synthesizer and really brings that to the recording studio. And you get some really interesting albums out of it. The sound of all these albums are completely different than the first 4 albums. Like, you have Grace Under Pressure and Power Windows in 1984 and 1985, which are they're just great. Anyways, we're moving on. So when we hit the early 90s, Alex Lifeson didn't really like taking the back seat, especially because the synthesizers kind of played the role of the lead guitar. So he was like, no more synths. We're not doing that anymore. So they returned to a kind of heavy feel, especially in Counterparts. The first track starts out with like this epic drum part. It starts with a countdown and then this epic drum part and then an in-your-face guitar. And that's gonna set the pace for the remainder of Rush's history here. And so when we hit 96, Test for Echo came out. And then in 1997 or 98, unfortunately, Neil Peart, the drummer's wife and only daughter, passed away in a matter of like 6 months. And so he quit music, and Rush was dead as we know it. And he got on his motorcycle and he drove around North America and South America for over a year. His friends didn't really know where he was. His family didn't really know where he was. And he would just send postcards back. And so he did this for over a year. But then a few years later, he decides he wants to return to music, and Rush is back, and the fans rejoice. And they come out in 2002 with an album called Vapor Trails, it's an intense album, very, very noisy, and it deals with a lot of the things that he was going through during that time period. Like, there's a track called Ghost Rider on there, the 3rd track on the album, I think, and it deals with it pretty much the monologue that was going on in his head while he was driving around. So really cool. But then they come out with Snakes and Arrows in 2007, Clockwork Angels in 2012, and those are all some great albums. This is a concept album. Definitely recommend checking out. There's a book that goes along with it. Definitely recommend reading that as well. But where is Rush today? Well, Rush completed a tour this past summer called R40, which was a celebration of the 40 years of Rush. And luckily, I was able to see them a few times on the tour. And this is...
How many times?
8 times. And this is a very special picture here, because this picture is from the last show in the Forum in LA. And it was a great show, very emotional show. And what's so special about it is Neil Peart, the guy in the center there, the drummer, he normally at the end of every show just stands up, does a quick wave to the audience, and then books off the stage to who knows where. But at the end of this concert, and he did that at the end of the last tour as well. I was at that show too. But anyways, he came out, he took center stage with his bandmates and kind of like soaked in the moment. And that kind of indicated to me at the time that Rush, as we know it, is over. And a few months later in the fall, he announced that he's retiring from music, and Rush is probably not going to exist anymore. But that's okay, because we've had an awesome 40 years. Luckily, I've been around for 22 of it. They've given 20 awesome albums, tons of material to analyze and digest and go through. So I think it's pretty great. And who knows what the future holds for Rush. So I just want to say thanks so much for listening to me, and I hope I've left an impression on you guys about Rush, and maybe my love of Rush will rub off on you guys. But I've created 2 playlists here, an intro to Rush, so if you're interested in listening to Rush, this is some of their hits on the intro to the Spotify playlist. And then if you're already familiar with Rush, I created a Rush Deep Tracks list. So what they don't play on the radio is on that track list. And I spelled question. Is that spelled right? I don't know. But does anyone have any questions? No questions? Oh, Runner.
If you had to pick a favorite album.
Oh, easy. Actually, that's favorite song's harder, but favorite album, let's head back here for a second. Favorite album is definitely Roll the Bones here. And the reason because Roll the Bones, I think it depends at the time of life when I listen to it, but Roll the Bones is generally about just the randomness of life. Like life is incredibly random, and you you can't really control most aspects of it, and the only thing you can do is take advantage of the opportunity that you're given. And if you can't capitalize on that, guess what? There's going to be another opportunity. And one of my favorite tracks is "Ghost of the Chance" off of that album, and it's about like relationships and the randomness of finding someone who like you can really connect with. And if you met someone in a different situation, how the outcome could be completely different. So that's probably my favorite album. Yeah, cool.
And Nick's gonna finish us off here, and he's gonna talk about some music as well.
Oh God, Jesus.
Oh,
All right.
no.
So I'm going to be doing a quick overview of a bunch of genres of music. Now, here are a few disclaimers. I'm very biased. This is kind of going to be more towards some genres that I listen to more. Also, a lot of genre classifications can be pretty suggestive, so people are going to disagree about what a specific artist's genres may or may not be. There's also a lot of overlap between genres. We're going to see a lot of genres inspiring each other, and a lot of genres kind of getting together and creating new subgenres. And I'm not going to mention all of those because it would take way too long. We're also focusing mostly on American music. I'm skipping like most world music because it would just take too long. So we're going to start off with some genres of electronic music. So I'm pretty much most of these are in alphabetical order. So ambient music is going to have some like very lighter sounds, kind of more pulsing slow music. Now something totally different, breakbeat. We're going to start seeing that we have kind of like a 4/4 pattern going, and we're going to have these like bigger beats on genres like big beat kind of bands like The Prodigy are going to have some very kind of pulsing bass and 808 kick drums and whatnot going on there. Chiptune music, often considered to be 8-bit music, is made on like a bunch of Game Boys and whatnot. A lot of video game music and music inspired by video game cultures in the chiptune genre. But chiptune kind of talks more about the specific styles of those sounds and not just about the kind of 8-bit lower music resolution that you get on these devices. Down-tempo electronic music is going to be a lot slower. Of course, we're just going to have slower tempo ranges, including genres like New Age and trip-hop. Trip-hop is going to have a lot of influences off of hip-hop and kind of have some more intricate beats but still slower tempos. Kind of one of the big front runners of trip hop is going to be Massive Attack, and some bands like Gorillaz also do a lot of trip hop work. Oops, that's a little bit off. So drum and bass is kind of based off of breakbeat. Actually, yeah, based off of breakbeat, and we're going to see a lot of like big hitting kicks going as well. Bands like Pendulum are big on drum and bass. Now we're going to move on to electronica. Electronica is hard to define at a top level. It's kind of like a lot of music that came out of more electronic dance music. EDM and electronica, there's kind of related to each other, I guess. Chillwave is going to kind of be some ambient-ish influenced electronic music. IDM, which stands for Intelligent Dance Music, is kind of an offshoot of EDM. A lot of artists like mostly Autechre and Aphex Twin are said to have created IDM. I don't really like the terminology because it kind of implies that it's better than other genres of electronica, but you're going to see like some very fast and more experimental electronic music going on with IDM. Glitch is going to involve some kind of more interesting sounds and sometimes also more experimental rhythms and kind of noisy sounds inspired by the noise genre. Also, we're going to have subgenres of rock inspired by electronica. I won't go into that much because that's kind of just a combination. Depends on the band, how that turns out. Indie-tronica is kind of a more indie rock inspired version of electronic rock. And synth pop is going to be some very synth-driven music, like a classic Calvin Harris, for example. We're also going to have more hardcore electronica genres that have kind of faster and more abrasive sounds to them as well, including like genres like breakcore and speedcore, which kind of build off of breakbeat. And yes, speedcore is like a super fast, like even more hard hitting version of breakcore, which itself is kind of a more abrasive version of breakbeat. Now I'm gonna go very high level, not gonna go in depth onto hip hop. So kind of hip hop, the biggest origins are we're going to see East Coast hip hop mainly out of New York City, West Coast, largely out of Los Angeles. Um, Classic West Coast artist would be like Dr. Dre, and classic East Coast would be Jay-Z, for example. They've evolved a lot over the years. They used to have kind of more differing sounds. I feel like they've taken a lot of influence off of each other lately, but I'm not going to go deeper into the history of it all. Alternative hip hop kind of combines more alternative styles of music and kind of other genres into hip hop, and we're going to see artists like Flying Lotus kind of doing some more experimental music with hip hop. We're going to see alternative rock influences, depending on the band and subgenre of alternative hip hop. There's a lot of them. Gangster rap is kind of going to be based off of the more classic, old school hip hop culture that was based around gangs, especially in West Coast hip hop. And trap music is going to be kind of more heavy hitting, abrasive sounds and rhythms and lyrical styles as well. Trap is very common in modern hip hop these days. As far as pop goes, pop is obviously a more mainstream genre, but some of the more interesting offshoots of that, in my opinion, are Baroque pop. Probably the Beach Boys are one of the most popular frontrunners of Baroque pop, and with Baroque pop, we're going to see a lot of combinations of classical Baroque period music. We're going to see like different, not just instrumentals, but orchestral music being combined into more modern pop style stuff. Great modern Baroque pop artist, for example, Julia Holter. Pop rock kind of fuses modern rock with modern pop. Psychedelic pop kind of takes some more ideas of more psychedelic music and applies some pop aspects to that. Classic example is Pink Floyd, which is also psychedelic rock. So they're kind of pop rock as well, I guess you could say. Synth pop, I believe I mentioned that before as well, is going to be heavily driven by more, not heavy, but like faster, more upbeat synth music as well. Okay, so rock. So alternative rock is kind of this huge subgenre of rock that's really complicated and kind of combines a lot of influences from other genres. We're going to see dream pop. It focuses a lot more on like the atmosphere and slow-moving rock music, like bands like Beach House, for example. Grunge is going to take some very kind of distorted guitars and just this kind of more distorted, slow, grungy style, especially probably one of the big front runners is Nirvana. And indie rock is going to kind of take aspects of indie music, apply them to alternative rock, and we're going to see kind of different styles of vocals happening. It's a huge subgenre. I'm not going to talk about it more. Art rock is kind of going to combine some more avant-garde music with rock and kind of apply some more like experimental artistic music as an influence of rock. David Bowie is a classic example of art rock. Math rock is going to take some kind of more interesting time signatures and kind of unusual rhythms and whatnot and combine them with rock music. One example of a math rock band would be like Battles or American Football. New Wave is going to be kind of a slower style of rock. I don't know much about it, honestly. Noise rock is going to combine some more abrasive sounds and kind of screeches and sometimes silent noise with rock. It's kind of a little bit more underground. Some bands like Health would be noise rock, for example. Progressive rock is going to take more progressive styles of music and kind of building sounds over time and adding that idea to rock. And punk rock involves kind of more abrasive underground sounds as well, coming out of more like anti-establishment social movements of different cities like Detroit and whatnot with big music scenes. So metal or heavy metal is a big subgenre of rock. There's an alternative subgenre of pretty much everything, including metal. And one big subgenre we're going to see is nu metal. Kind of more popular bands like Korn and Slipknot are going to be classified under nu metal, and they're going to get calm down. and they're going to be influenced a lot by other genres like hip hop and alternative rock and whatnot. Black metal is going to kind of involve more kind of growls and kind of grungy-ish sounds. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Black metal is going to be a more fast-paced genre of metal, and death metal is going to involve kind of more growls. Melodic death metal is specifically going to have some more singing along with this theme as well. And technical death metal is going to combine kind of more unusual time signatures with the subcategory of death metal. Doom metal is kind of be slower, maybe a little bit more grungy than most of these subgenres of metal. Gothic metal is going to have influences from other styles of Gothic music. Metalcore is kind of a very fast-paced subgenre of metal with some much faster percussion and bass going on. Deathcore combines metalcore with death metal. Mathcore combines it with other genres of math, which are going to have some pretty unconventional time signatures and rhythms, as we're also going to see with things similar to prog metal, but they're a little bit different. Quite a bit different, actually. I already mentioned new metal. Whoops. Post metal is going to combine aspects of metal with post rock, and we're going to see like more influences from progressive styles of music and kind of orchestral arrangements. Sometimes it's instrumental, sometimes it's not. Tool is going to be a big post metal band here. Power metal is going to kind of be a lot of, I don't know how to describe it, like stronger, fastish, not really fastish, but faster paced metal. And prog is going to be based off of more progressive styles of track development. We're going to see a lot of instrumentation building very gradually, not necessarily always having your typical song form. Sometimes we're going to see some very long tracks in Dream Theater. And gent is a subgenre of progressive metal which has this a very specific sound of palm muted guitars, usually even and usually faster paced than most other prog metal. All right, so the last kind of one of the stranger big top genres we're going to talk about is avant-garde. Avant-garde music is usually much more experimental, and with experimental music in general, we're going to see people working with the idea of creating music that doesn't really follow any traditional song structure, sometimes goes out of its way to be something that you don't predict. A classic example is John Cage's piece 433, which is literally 4 minutes and 33 seconds of recorded silence. Noise is kind of takes some inspiration from experimental, but we're going to see kind of screeches and different kind of more mechanical sounds and whatnot being used to kind of build more flowy music in different ways depending on the artist, and it's not always going to follow your typical sound structure. All right, and one of the biggest resources I pulled from this is Wikipedia's huge article of popular music genres. There's an even larger list that includes even more genres, but these are mostly kind of popular in the 20th and 21st century genres in the United States, and I definitely didn't even cover like a fourth of these. So if you're interested in looking into more subgenres, that's worth checking out. Any questions?
Can you give examples of bands in the metal category, please?
I mean, like what metal category? I mean, basically just Slipknot. Do you want to give any?
No, I want to hear your suggestions.
I mean, I already gave some. What do you want?
What about melodic death metal?
I don't listen to melodic death metal. I don't listen to that much death metal.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
What's your preferred genre and why?
So I don't really have one preferred genre,
Gent.
but okay, gent is pretty awesome. I gotta say, gent is pretty awesome. Lately, I've been listening to a little bit more like experimental and noise stuff, just because there's a lot of really interesting stuff that you wouldn't expect out of it, and really interesting sound design, even though it's often very harsh on the ears and atypical. If you're just looking for some like more relaxing music to listen to, don't listen to that. I'm also like really obsessed with indie rock, and yeah, I also really enjoy like genres like mathcore and whatnot that kind of play with time signatures and specifically get more unusual rhythm
rhythms going than faster paced stuff. Most of the metal I like to listen to is faster paced stuff.
Where would you say Meshuggah fits into that?
Gent. Meshuggah basically created Gent, along with like artists like Convergent. What? I didn't mention Meshuggah? What's wrong with me? I'm sorry.
You said, what was it, the Gent, right? Or,
Yeah, it's the Gent.
How easy do you think it is to play that genre of music?
It's pretty easy. You can go on YouTube and look up Gent Stick, and you just make one of those, and you just like strum pretty fast, and you basically
Just
Gent.
once. Okay.
No, that's not how it works. So for Meshuggah's track Bleed, the bassist literally had to teach himself how to play the bass in a totally different way because he couldn't play fast enough. So I think that's a good example.
You got lessons from Kenny Lee.
Did he really?
He did?
Did he?
Wait, seriously? No? God damn it. Alright. Any other questions? Alright, thanks. Here's our next slide.
All right, I think that's it. So thanks for coming, guys. This was pretty good. So I think we might have more Microtalks in the future. So. Take pizza on your way out.
Did everybody sign in? If not, sign in.
We have lots of pizza left.